Good afternoon. My name is Jim Conlan, and welcome back to the third part of our sports show. As you know, in part three of our sports show each week, we premiere international events taking place in terms of promoting sports outside of Ireland. And up for discussion this week, well, what can we say? Ireland is deeply rooted in boxing. It's such a massive boxing culture, and we do like to promote special events in terms of some of the big fights happening worldwide in boxing. And one that is coming our way is on August the 5th. It's on the pay-per-view card of Jake Paul versus Nate Diaz, an all-star pay-per-view card, which also includes Amanda Serrano is fighting as well, Heather Hardy. But this fight in particular is a real one, as the two super middleweight contenders get it on. Probably one is the mandatory challenger for Savannah Marshall's belt, and the other one is a top five ranked contender in the super middleweight contender in the super middleweight division. They clash August the 15th, and really a pivotal matchup on the terms of the top of the division. It's Shadasia Green versus our special guest this evening, her opponent, Olivia Curry. And Olivia, first of all, the pay-per-view itself, it's a really blockbuster pay-per-view put together with three blockbuster main event fights that all could headline a card. You've Jake Paul versus Nate Diaz, Amanda Serrano versus Heather Hardy, and Shadasia Green versus yourself, Olivia Curry. So really the fans who are buying their tickets for the fight and are going to be there in person, they're really sort of getting a treat. It's normally in matches you have maybe 3 or 4 warm-up matches to keep the crowd going before the main event, but this is like 3 main events rolled into one, really.
Yeah, it is, and I'm really excited that we have 2 female fights that are going to be on the card along with Jake Paul. I'm excited to be fighting on the same card as Amanda Serrano, who to me is an inspiration, at a lower weight class, but someone who's been fighting for a long time. So I think it's a really exciting card.
Yeah, and I suppose, Olivia, in terms of your division, I suppose it's been well, I wouldn't say blown open, but there has been sort of change in the last sort of month. Obviously, with Savannah coming back to the top of that sort of division with her win against Defron Cruz. Um, and in terms of that, it's also saying to now that other contenders are maybe stepping up to the mark and seeing opportunities, and these unblemished records are being defeated and going by the wayside. And your opponent is one of those who's holding an unblemished record, Shadasia Green, and much is talked about her, I have to say, in terms of she's gone out like a train to 12 wins, 11 knockouts. But you must be thinking to yourself, right, she's gone out to such a whirlwind start, but do you feel she's taken on anyone really yet of your caliber, or anyone in your league? Yes. Do you think they've been sort of fights, arranged fights, just to propel her to this 12-0 as fairly quick as possible?
Yeah, there's a little bit of both. I don't want to take anything away from her because her last fight was against Elin Cederroos, who's a former world champion, big girl, tough fight, tough fighter. But there's also some folks that she's fought back in the early stages of her career that she has knockout wins against, who really are meant to be 140 pounders, who were kind of fighting above their natural weight class. And so I think the great thing about boxing is there's only one way to find out. I obviously feel like I have what it takes to be there. I'm coming up also from, I'm naturally a middleweight. So I'm coming up for this fight. And I feel like that gives me an advantage in terms of, maybe cardio speed. So we'll have to see how it plays out, but I'm confident.
Yeah, and in terms of that, Olivia, you're saying you're coming up a sort of division to make this fight. Did you feel maybe the previous division that you were below was a sort of a struggle to make the weight in terms of camp to make that? Would you feel that your body was naturally sort of developing? Do you feel more comfortable at this sort of weight class in terms of not having as much restrictions?
I'll have to see how I feel on fight night because I've never fought at super middleweight before. I really like middleweight feels right to me. That I've never struggled to make that 160, but it's exactly what you said earlier about the action that's going on at super middleweight right now, where you have Franchon Cruz Dezern, where you have Savannah Marshall, you have Shadasia, who I'm fighting. There's just a little more going on, right? So that's why we're excited to just go where the action is and fit in where we can fit in.
Yeah, and I suppose you mentioned that because you mentioned the amount of female fighters that are around the place. So it is a short-term profession, dare I say, in terms of a professional women's sort of boxing career. So what you want to do in terms of your career, it's all about memories, I suppose, having those sellout packed arenas, having the sort of big fights moments. Some you win, some you lose, but there are the sort of ones you treasure as a sporting athlete. So I suppose with so many fewer of you really have to go where the big names is, the big star appeal, the big sort of fights. Because at the end of the day, you could stay where you are and sort of be comfortable and fight people that you feel that you only need to turn up 70% of the time, 70% of your performance. But I suppose when you look back in your career, then you will say, well, what if, I suppose.
Yeah, I think so. And I always told my coach, the reason I'm in this sport, I didn't grow up necessarily with boxing. I came to it later, like a lot of women do. And for me, it's about finding the biggest challenges, seeing what I can do, how far I can push myself, what my body can do. There's no point to me in cherry picking fights and trying to fight fights that you're going to win. You might as well, the true beauty of the sport is when you get two top people of the same caliber in there and you have to really fight it out and see who's the best on the night.
And I suppose you're coming off 5 straight wins in a row heading into this fight. And I suppose early on in your career, you had that sort of one blemish. But do you think maybe that's a sort of, dare I say, it's not really a negative as such because so many fighters are scared of losing. They get to 12, 13, 14 and 0, and they get scared of that sort of slip up. And it happens to every fighter at every stage. Look, it's going to happen between Errol Spence and Terence Crawford, two of the best fighters on the planet. Someone's always got to go fairly soon in terms of that fight. So it's inevitable that it will sort of happen at some stage. Do you think maybe having that monkey off your back maybe is a good thing in terms of, because it gives you a free spirit, while maybe it's something that maybe is rattling around in Shadisia's brain in terms of if she wants that fight, that big super fight against Clarissa Shields in the future or something like that, that a blemish could push her way back and down the line again?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I do feel like, the pressure's on her a little bit. She's got the name, she's got the backing of Jake Paul. She has a lot to lose here, and I just hate losing. I don't want to lose, but because I have experienced that, I feel like the sport is about more than trying to keep a clean record, right? I think it's more interesting. And back in the day, you had guys, the best in the world, always had losses, and I sort of want to see boxing return to that a little bit, because it makes it more interesting for the fans.
Yeah, and I suppose Olivia, in terms of, obviously when we look at your sort of records, they're fairly sort of similar, but you come into it maybe in years in terms of being the more experienced fighter in terms of life sort of experience as well. Do you think maybe in terms of that, that's going to lead? I'm not going to ask you for strategy or your game plan, obviously, but do you think that's going to have a unique effect on the match in terms of that we're going to see that the different age gaps are going to probably lead to sort of different sort of strategies, because it is a 10 rounder, and I suppose you have to sort of think out, map the sort of fight out, because normally some of these fights the women's division win the best meet the best, and this was Savannah Marshall. I spoke to her. She says they don't normally, it's very rare that knockouts happen. It's only when someone's overmatched. But when two people are equally enough, you sort of have to prepare for the long haul. So is that the sort of strategy that you may be having to think yourself that, yeah, that this more than likely, if I am successful, that it will go to 10 rounds more than likely?
Yeah, I'm definitely preparing for 10 rounds, and I think that's something too that, Shadasia, I've never gone 10, I've gone 8 several times, but I've never had a 10-round fight because I'm kind of learning on the job, I've only been pro for 2 years, even though I've had a lot of fights, comparatively, but she hasn't gone to 10 rounds either because she stopped a lot of people, and I think we're gonna see, if we get to that round 7, 8, I think we're going to see who's in better shape. And that's, a big factor in a fight.
And I suppose in terms of that training camp, so in terms of preparing for a 10-round sort of fight, I suppose it has to go to an extra level in terms of work, in terms of preparation, in terms of everything that you put into fight. And let's call a spade a spade. This fight is on national TV. It's pro mid-air. It's going out in front of a massive worldwide audience. There's going to be an awful lot of public eyes on that. So it's a great advertisement for both yourself and Shadasia as well, for big money fights in the future as well. So would it be wrong to say that for both of you, it's probably the biggest fight in your career so far?
Yeah, I think so. I think so. You'd have to ask her. She fought at Madison Square Garden. That was a big fight for me. It's definitely the biggest fight of my career, which is exciting. It's all the more reason for me to come in hungry and really ready to show the best version of myself.
Yeah, and I suppose in terms of that, if you were to get a victory over the mandatory challenger, obviously it propels you straight into the title picture in terms of that. So if you were, and if the plan goes and your plan goes and your preparation goes successfully in terms of that, would you like to capitalize that on that straight away and look for the world title fight before the end of the year? Or are you thinking to yourself, maybe, yeah, I might, after this, I might need one more tune-up fight to get me into sort of the contention for that? Or are you thinking to yourself, I'm in my 30s now, bring on these fights, the sooner the better, while the body and the head is still able to do it?
Yeah, I'm kind of thinking that way. I'm ready for the big fights. I think if this goes according to plan, we'll obviously see what my team says. All depends on how you look in the fight, all that kind of stuff, how it goes. But I don't see any reason not to go for the big ones.
Yeah, I gotta ask you, and I suppose I spoke to another fighter previewing another fight there today, and I suppose boxing is such a global sport now, and there's so many sort of different sort of areas and different fights, and sometimes for boxers they have to face into daunting atmospheres to get the job done. But in terms of, like, Chantel Cameron went to our own country, Ireland, and one of the most daunting atmospheres ever, to take on a living legend in terms of Katie Taylor. And I know Katie probably jumped up 5 or 6 divisions that she probably shouldn't have in terms of that, which such was Katie's ego. She just wanted the biggest name possible. But for you, in terms of that, Chantel went over to Donticule. Does that something that daunts you or fears you, that the possibility of a major fight after Shadis, and if you're successful, that you might have to go to the UK, you might have to go to Savannah Marshall's home ground, in terms of that, in terms of Manchester, in terms of Leeds, if you want that world title fight? Is that something you're prepared to do if the champion says, listen, you got to come to me?
I've never been to Manchester, so I'll go. I think it sounds like a fun trip, especially if I can come back with some belts in hand.
Yeah. Yeah,
I'll go
so
anywhere.
yeah, so it doesn't daunt you, it doesn't sort of phase you, going in. I suppose, obviously, when you head into those environments, they can be cauldrons, and it's something that you mightn't experience in the States. You can be arch sort of villains. Your anthem could get booed, your walk ring could get booed, every sort of gesture your crowd could get booed as well. In terms of Ireland and the UK, it can be fairly hostile. That doesn't daunt you at all, no?
It doesn't daunt me, no. I think, I feel kind of like an underdog anyways. I don't think people know who I am. I haven't had these televised fights. I don't have a big promoter backing me. So I'm already a little bit like the unknown factor coming in here. I've been booed before. It doesn't really bother me, but I think I'm gonna try to make the UK and Ireland love me before I get there.
Yeah. And I suppose, Olivia, in terms of what I sort of like sometimes about the big women sort of fighters in terms of the division, there seems to be a mutual sort of respect in terms of, we see a class now between Crawford and Spence, how they're conducting them. But the real top women fighters, there seems to be that as well. Gone are the days of the Bravo and the sort of cursing and ripping each other and sort of stuff like that. And do you think that's good for the sport of boxing? Because we see all these influencers now, and God forbid what they're doing is, dare I say, it's putting the sport in both codes back 10 or 12 years, and maybe it's sort of professionalism. They just don't get that sort of attitude in terms of the professional sort of ethos that comes with boxing, in terms of it is an Olympic sport. So do you almost feel that these press conferences, that you can be more yourself now, that you don't need to have to sell these stages, do the sort of the WWE wrestling sort of storylines to garnish the sort of attention that might have been needed in the past?
Yeah, I mean, I never mind. Look, we all know it's entertainment, right? We
Yeah.
all know that there's an aspect of this that is, trying to rope in new fans. So I don't mind a little of that. If people start talking smack, a little of that is okay in my book, but it's not really me. I'm sort of like I wouldn't say quiet, but maybe a more introverted person. And I think what I will say is that fighters, in my experience, not in press conferences and stuff, but in the gym, like when you really meet them, fighters respect other fighters. Those are the people that have the best things to say about each other when the cameras are off and the microphones are off. I don't really see the need to pretend like it's any different. But I get why people want to make it fun, and I think as long as things are all in good fun, a little bit of smack talk never hurt anyone, but it's not really my style.
So we have the big fights. Obviously, Shadasia Green is a big fight. Savannah Marshall is a big fight. Frances Cruz obviously was probably going to be looking at this match as well in terms of a potential fight for her. Obviously, she's going to be eager to make amends if she doesn't get that rematch against Savannah Marshall for a while as well. But I'm just sort of wondering, 4 or 5 sort of be clustering around, and sort of one of you will have to come to the fruition and maybe step up and take on what the self-proclaimed ghost, as she calls herself, Clarissa Shields, in the near future as well, in terms of that. And is that something that you would feel, maybe in time to come, if you are successful in these next 2 or 3 big fights? Obviously you would be looking at these fights first before you even dare, I suppose, go after Clarissa. But if you were successful against Shadisa or Savannah or Franchon Cruz, would you then think to yourself, yeah, that Clarissa would be the next step on the ladder after that? Because at the moment she seems to be a level above everyone else, and she's looking to come down to look to find fights, but at the moment no one seems to want to go up that level again to take her on.
Yeah, I would love to fight her. I have a lot of respect for Clarissa and her skill set. And it's also kind of the thing. You're right. She seems like a bit of a level above right now. Like no one's cracked the code. So if you're the one who cracks the code, right, that gives you a little bit of respect in the boxing community as well. And that's my normal weight class. So, this is also one reason why I'm moving up, not because I don't want to fight her, but, no one's called us. So we're going to where the phone calls come. But I'd love to fight back at middleweight against the best in the world. Who wouldn't?
Yeah, who wouldn't indeed? And I suppose obviously there's some major fights in women's boxing, and it's been a great year for women's boxing the last few years. Do you think we're going to see more of this in the future? And do you think maybe all the publicity that women's boxing is getting in the last year or two is going to lead to an explosion? Maybe we mightn't see it now in the next 3 or 4 years, but maybe in the next decade, 10 years time, where we're going to have full women's cards, where you're going to have 6 to 7 fights on a DAS or a Sky Sports that are just going to be women from fight one until five the main event sort of night. Do you think that's a near possibility that's going to happen in the near future?
I think so. I hope so. We saw when Katie Taylor and Amanda Serrano fought at Madison Square Garden, from multiple people, that was like the best live fight night that they've ever been to. I don't think there's any reason that women can't sell out arenas. And we see the skill set climbing really rapidly. Part of the reason for that is just because we didn't really have the opportunity. We don't have the history that men have of, starting when we're 5, but now we're starting to see at the amateur tournaments, the young girls, are boxing too. That's going to make the difference, because I didn't start boxing. I started fighting kind of Muay Thai kickboxing when I was about 21. I didn't even really start boxing seriously until about 6 or 8 years ago, and even then it was a learning curve. If I had started when I was 5 or 6 years old, I mean, I can only imagine how much greater my skills would be. So I think we are going to see that in the next 10 years, that women are going to really like rapidly ascend. And I think it'll be entertaining for everyone, men included.
Okay, and Olivia, second last question for you. Obviously, you're a boxing enthusiast. You obviously, in terms of female sort of boxing, and what was your sort of reaction, obviously, in terms of we here in Ireland, Katie's lost to Chantel Cameron? Do you think it's affected her legacy going forward in terms of women's boxing, in terms of how she will be remembered, in terms of that was her homecoming, that was her big sort of fight in Ireland? Do you think maybe she took on too much that she could have handled? Do you think it was a desperation to get a big name that she went 3 or 4 or 5 steps up against the norm? Or do you hold guts for her in terms of saying, listen, she didn't want to take a gimme fight coming home in Ireland and sort of stuff like that? Or how do you think that loss is going to be reflected and Katie's going to be remembered for that loss in a certain way?
I don't see it as staying on her legacy or her career at all. I really love Katie Taylor. I love how she boxes. I think Chantel Cameron also boxes beautifully. I think, boxing, one other reason people love the sport is it's kind of a sport that becomes like metaphor, because there's all this extra significance that gets placed on the narrative of boxing stories. And I think for Katie Taylor, there's something to be said about taking the biggest challenges and her being that type of person that's willing to fight the best. And if it results in a loss, to me, she's not done yet. All that means is, for her personality type, she gets to come back and try to prove again in the future, why she's the best with another win. I think it sets it up for a rematch potentially, or other interesting forward movement in women's boxing, and that's just good for everyone. So I see it as, I don't want to say a good thing, I'm sure she wishes she had won, but it's an interesting piece of her story, and she's nothing to feel ashamed about at all.
Okay, and Olivia Curry, now for the final 30 seconds, we're going to get back to you. Your big fight on August the 5th in American Airlines Center, Dallas, against Shadasia Green, a 10-rounder. Tell me, what do you think we're going to see in this fight, and what is Olivia Curry going to bring to this fight? And Olivia Curry, what's going to be the outcome of this fight?
Well, I think what you're going to see is you're going to see a lot of chatter from the DAZN commentators and people surrounding the fight and the betting odds, saying that I'm going to get knocked out, that I'm going to lose, that Shadasia's too big and strong. And I think what you're going to see is a 10-round fight that is going to be just a banger of a fight. We're going to put on a really good show, and I believe I'm going to win. I'm going in there to win.
You're going in there to win, and we wish you all that success in the world. Olivia Curry taking on Shadasia Green. It's 12 wins for Shadasia. It's roughly 7 wins on the last 5 wins on the trot for Olivia Curry. Super middleweight contenders. It's the #1 contender, Shadasia Green, against the top 5 ranked contender in Olivia Curry. They get it on in a stacked pay-per-view event. It also includes Jake Paul versus Nate Diaz, which also includes the blockbuster fight with Savannah Marshall. With Amanda Serrano also fighting. Excuse me, Amanda Serrano fighting as well against Heather Hardy. Do check it out, August the 5th on pay-per-view. Olivia Curry, lastly, from me, Jim Conlan, to you, Olivia Curry, all the best on August 5th. Do stay safe, do stay healthy, and do look forward to maybe a world title fight before the end of 2023.
That sounds good to me. Thank you, Jim.
Thank you. Take care, Olivia.
Thanks. You too. Appreciate you.